should just tell jokes.
Yes.
While we wait. Say what teacher dance. All I can do is the can-can.
Just this.
Sean and I were doing the can-can this morning, and then after we were just joking around, and then the whole morning that song was playing in my head. Voices. What?
Maybe if you sing it for us.
I can't sing the can-can. Somebody who speaks French should sing the can-can. I can't sing that.
I thought singing it was just going
Da, 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 da. No, I think there actually are French lyrics to it, aren't there? I think there are. I think so.
Right.
Sing anything.
Somebody look that up. Are there French lyrics to the can-can? And what's the actual name? It's not called the can-can. It's like there's an actual name to the piece, but I don't know what it is. Okay. Let me go ahead and introduce myself because I haven't had a chance to meet all of you. My name is Martha Burtis, and I also work at the University of Mary Washington with Jesse and Sean, and I've been there for Jesse likes to tell people I've been there for 67 years, which is not true. I've just been there for a really long time, for basically my entire adult life. I was actually a student there back in the 90s. And then after I graduated, eventually I made my way back after getting a degree in instructional technology to the then instructional technology department, and I've watched about, all told, about 17 to 18 years of sort of change and growth and development at Mary Washington in our field. And for years and years I worked in faculty development, which the meaning of that word was really, really different when I first started at Mary Washington to when I stopped that role. And it's been kind of a joyous thing to be a part of that. And I'm going to talk today about lots of reasons, but one of the reasons, which is a project that we originated at UMW called Domain of One's Own, which you may or may not be familiar with, and if you're not, don't worry, because I'm going to talk about it today. Currently, though, I don't really do faculty development. I run a center that opened in 2014 called the Digital Knowledge Center, and we provide one-on-one and small group peer tutoring for students who are working on digital media and assignments. And it's a really critical piece for us at Mary Washington. We have, not only do we have a really strong history and legacy of kind of digitally inflected classes across the disciplines, we have a digital studies minor and a communication and digital studies major, which are the fastest growing. It's the fastest growing major. I think it's the fastest growing minor, but I'm not sure, on campus. So it's hugely popular. And our students, we kind of got to a point in 2014 where we realized our students needed a different kind of support than we were able to provide through teaching and learning technologies. And in the past, our relationship with students, when I was working in DTLT, was really sort of filtered through our relationships with faculty. So we would be like these people who would like sweep in and appear for a couple of days, maybe over the course of a semester, to help a faculty member show something to students or to help students with stuff. And then when students got to a point where they got stuck or they wanted to go further, we would kind of try and address that in really haphazard ways. So we did, in addition to those class visits, we did a lot of just like email support for students, which is really not the best way of developing relationships with students. And also we worked in this like labyrinth of a building, and so like occasionally students would just like stumble upon us, and they'd just like knock on the door and be like, "Can you help me with WordPress?" And we were like, "Sure, come on in." Like we were like the mole people, and WordPress. And so there was just, they didn't really understand who we didn't really understand what we did, and so I had been a part of a conversation at the university for years that said we need something else. Like we need another way for our students to land, another place for our students to land, and we also need a place for our faculty to provide kind of a safety net for them as they embarked on their journeys with digital pedagogy and using technology in their classes. And so my center opened, and that's been my work for the last 4 years has been designing and programming and managing that center, and it's been the most joyous job of my life because I get to work with students every day, and I get to do it in a really, really kind of meaningful, empowering way. My tutors, I thought when I opened the center, my job, like my mission was to provide tutoring, and it is, like that's the mission of the center, but actually, my real mission are my tutors, because they are the people who I work with in really, really deep and meaningful ways, and kind of help them not only to understand what the practice of peer tutoring is, but also to see them become really empowered as practitioners of digital media, digital studies, and working with their peers to share that empowerment. I tell my tutors that the most important moment in any tutorial is when they don't know how to do something, when a student asks them for help. And it's really hard because what I tell them is, when that happens, your instinct is going to be to come find me. When my office is right off the center, you're going to get nervous. Like, I was a writing tutor in college, and I remember that was just like grammar. People would ask me grammar, I'd be like, I think I know this rule, but I think I just forgot it. It was really nerve-wracking and really scary. Tutoring is a really vulnerable, it's a vulnerable activity. The tutor needs to be vulnerable, the student needs to be vulnerable. And I said, so you're going to want to come and you're going to want to ask me to come in and fix the problem, and I can do that. But it's actually the worst thing you can do, because what it signals to that student you're working with is that I somehow have magical powers, like the people in the back room have magical powers that fix these things when they break. And that's not actually true, because you, tutor, when it's midnight on a Sunday night and your website breaks, you don't call me. Like, you would never call me. You probably wouldn't even email me unless you tried like a dozen things and it still didn't work. You would practice this discipline of yours, and you would sort of you would do all kinds of self-addressing of that problem, and you would work through it, and you might ask a classmate for help, or your roommate for help, or somebody else in your dorm for help, and so really what you need to do is model for them in those moments, in those really vulnerable moments, the most vulnerable moments, how you do that, so that they can begin to see that this isn't magic, right? That this is practice, and they can also see you be empowered through that, and hopefully imagine themselves being empowered through that. But then also, come see me. Like, that doesn't mean that you should spend like half an hour spinning your wheels until you're on the verge of tears, because, and I've been there as a tutor and as a faculty developer and as a supporter of students, when you're like, oh my God, I can't fix this, and this person is really depending on me to help them. So that you do need to come see me, but first you need to try and show them how you deal with these problems. So I just wanted to share that a little bit as a way of like the story to me, and why students in this work is so important to me, and why it's really become sort of the thing I'm most passionate about. And then I want to address this picture up here because it's really depressing, and I love it so much. I taught a class. I teach a digital storytelling class at Mary Washington, and every time we teach it, it has a larger following online called DS106, which some people may be familiar with. But I'm part of that community, but I also teach a credit-bearing digital storytelling class from time to time. And whenever we teach it through some kind of lens or through some sort of other narrative, like we kind of like layer a story on top of the class. And so last spring I taught that class around the theme of the apocalypse, because I love the apocalypse. Who doesn't love the apocalypse? Which is like a really strange thing to say. My favorite kind of apocalypse is technological apocalypse, because everybody should have a favorite apocalypse. And so this picture, when I found it this morning, I really wanted to use it, because where I want to start today is to talk about sort of, we've been alluding to this in other places over the last couple of days. I want to talk about where technology is in our conversations about education, and what messages people are hearing at our institutions, what our students are hearing, what people in the larger kind of public who are watching from the outside what we do in academia are hearing, and how that is complicating our relationship with our students and our relationship with our work in the classroom. So before, this is like a long preamble. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to dive in. I want to take a moment to address like how what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is in conversation with what Jesse talked about this morning, because we brought these two tracks together, and we actually had a reason for that. And the reason for that I think is really important is that the kind of work with digital that I'm going to be speaking to is very much focused on this notion of creating spaces of agency for students, and challenging some of our assumptions about what assignments look like and what student work looks like, and freeing ourselves maybe a little bit from expectations that we bring to this work. But I think it's really hard to do that effectively and well with students if we are positioning that within a box that looks like the traditional box. And in particular, I think assessment is a part of that. We talked about this in our talk yesterday, that assessment to me is sort of the language of power that we speak with students. And so when we don't rethink that language and we don't talk about that up front, it almost doesn't matter how hard we try to incorporate agency and spaces of agency into the work that we ask students to do, because you're saying, hey, do something really creative. I want the sky's the limit. Just think big, and here's the route. And those two things, there's just a tension in that, obviously. And so I think it's really important that we hold both of these things in our heads as we're working. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that more explicitly once we've talked about both of these things. So anyway, I sometimes write out my talks and I sometimes don't, and this time I didn't, but I do have some notes, and I don't want to stand in front of my computer. So it's on my phone, so if you see me looking at my phone, it's not because I'm checking Twitter. I'm looking at my notes, so don't be alarmed. So situating the student in our digital pedagogy is where I want to start, and I want to start by talking about how technology in education is very often associated with, and the language around it is often language of kind of impersonal and inhumane actions. So you hear people talking about online classes being bad and being not as good as face-to-face classes, and you hear about sort of technology eclipsing teaching, right? Technology becoming centered in the classroom over humanity in teaching. And there's lots of discussion, even outside of kind of just the sphere of education, about like, well, technology is leading to less personal engagement, right? We're all like this, and we're not talking, and our kids aren't talking, and we're tied to our devices, and kind of technology is taking over this, our humanity in ways. It's really problematic. And then we start to get into these narratives around sort of automated grading, and machine learning, and the LMS adding more and more features that dictate what we do in our class, and apps that are emerging that we're like, oh, this app is going to change everything, and now students are going to be really successful because they have this app. We have an app at our campus, and I know a lot of other campuses have it, that is like a student success app. Does anybody have a student success app at their schools? Yeah. Let's talk about that. I won't get into it now, but so this is kind of a dark view, but so the inhumane specter in our classrooms of technology, and what does that look like, and where does that come from? And so I have a bunch of stories here that are ripped from the headlines, like a Law and Order episode, so some of these you've probably talked about this week, and I just want to talk about them a little bit more. So Turnitin, right? So Turnitin being bought by Condé Nast Advanced Publications, and oh God, I love it. Turnitin being taught by Advanced Publications, and what that means, having this major, not education-related company, this publishing company, say, oh, well, this is our next market, is education. And then we have Purdue blocking Netflix and other streaming sites in their academic buildings. That was just announced last week. And what does that mean? And then this one, somebody just brought this up in my talk yesterday, the ban in Ontario on cell phones in classrooms.
That's not true.
I know, we're going to talk about that, don't worry. We talked about it in our track. And what that actually means, what is that? Instructure and machine learning and AI. And yeah, again, we're going to talk about that. And then this one's a little bit further back with, oh God, I love this story, which is these like robots in finished classrooms in Finland that are teaching. So anyway, so let's look at some quotes. So let's look at some great quotes from these articles. So I'm going to read them. Turnitin is also planning to extend its grading and plagiarism tools beyond writing and into science and math. Okay. It's also launching a new tool that aims to detect ghostwriting, or if students have hired others to write a paper for them. And wasn't the timing of that perfect?
Yeah.
Like right on the heels of the college admissions scandal in the States, suddenly Turnitin is like, don't worry, we got you.
Yeah.
We can detect this for you. So you don't need to worry anymore. So this is a long one. This is the Purdue ban. And I read this article like 7 times, and I was like, I don't understand, because this feels so schizophrenic to me. I'm going to read a series of quotes from this article. The ban was not driven by a desire to get students to pay more attention in class. Okay. The move was taken to prevent students from hogging bandwidth that others needed to do their work. Okay. Before the ban, just 4% of internet traffic over the Wi-Fi network in the university's life science building was from academic sites as Blackboard. And the ban is addressing that. It's not about engagement, it's about bandwidth. So I guess that means that Blackboard, bandwidth, was there just so much bandwidth on streaming services that now there's just, okay, all right, I'm trying to like understand exactly what that means. The ban can be temporarily lifted on request by professors. Okay. That's good to know. Like, how do they request that? Like, is that something you just push a button, or do you have to like file a form like a week before? They didn't say in the article, so I don't know. The ban has helped some students focus and pay more attention in class because they're no longer being distracted. But it wasn't for that reason. It wasn't about distraction. It was about bandwidth. And oh, by the way, Blackboard is now in the top 10 in the network, so that's a success. And students who are determined to watch movies in class could still do so just over the lecture room Wi-Fi. Not over the lecture room Wi-Fi, they can do it over their cell. Okay, like I don't actually understand. And more importantly, and this gets at the Ontario cell phone ban too, it's almost not about the ban, it's almost about what is that story telling us? Right, like what is that story telling students and what is that story telling professors? Like, okay, a professor can request to not have it, but that's an opt-out, not an opt-in. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, so now you have to think ahead and say, I might use a streaming service, so I need to figure out how to lift that ban. So what was a simple thing has now become an additional step, an additional practice that we have to build into our teaching. So this is the Ontario ban. The province will issue a directive to all public schools for the 1920 school year. How to enforce the ban would be up to individual boards and schools. Now, what people in my track said yesterday, and we can talk about this more broadly, is that actually already it wasn't banned, but it was at the discretion of the professor whether or not they wanted to do this. And exceptions would be made for when teachers want to use cell phones as part of their lesson for medical reasons and students with special needs. So again, there's this nod to, no, there are times when we don't want to ban these things, but we're still going to issue this directive that actually doesn't really do anything other than signal that we should maybe do this thing. And then what do you do with that? Like as an instructor, what do you do with that? As a student, what is that telling you about the use of these devices and the place of these devices in your classroom, in your class, and in your education? Okay, moving on. This is in structure. We have instructors and students consuming output from some of the initial experiments with DIG. And that sentence is just so scary. Like, they're consuming output from this secret program called DIG. And it just reads like a sentence from a science fiction novel. Now, in fairness, the language coming from instructor is coming from a conversation they were having with investors. It wasn't aimed at an education audience. It was aimed at a financial audience, which is really interesting. Like, I actually couldn't find the language that they were putting out for us. I could find the language they were putting out for the people who were trying to make money. And some people were like, oh, well, that's not really what they mean. That's just what they tell people because that's the language those people speak. But that's still the message that's coming out, is that we have instructors and students consuming output from this huge analytical system. Yeah?
Where was the consent?
Great question. Great question. Where was the consent? That was the question. So instructors have been collecting all of this data. They're going to use it to develop kind of artificial intelligence and machine learning. They're going to do this in aggregate, which is always kind of the like the back door. They're like, don't worry, we're not giving away your individual information. It's all in aggregate, so you don't need to worry. and yet it's still your data, right? Dig ultimately is a platform first and foremost based upon machine learning and artificial intelligence, and this is the money quote for me from this article, is that they actually said, I missed my eye. They said, in justifying this move to the investors, they said it may even be incumbent upon us to partner with the industry and evolve that industry with new insights and predictive modeling using AI and ML. And basically what they're saying is, we're a company in the cloud that's collected tons and tons of data about this sector. We have a responsibility. It's our job to use this to develop artificial intelligence and machine learning. We have no choice. It's for the good of humanity that we're going to do this. And then this one was from the robots in Finland. And so what's great about this quote? What are the two words that are just amazing about this quote? Human teachers. Some of the human teachers who work with the technology see it as a new way to engage children in their learning. We now have human teachers and robot teachers, if you didn't know. And the robot piece, like I started going down this rabbit hole of robots, which you shouldn't do. I did it for you so that you don't have to. But if you want to learn more, you should read everything Audrey Waters has ever written about all of this, because I'm just channeling this tiny little sliver. So I'm going to play this video. This is not a teacher. Does anybody know what this is?
May I critique before you play the video, actually?
Absolutely.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah.
Another term that stood out to me was actually children, and again, the work of Henry Giroux.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
Sorry. The word that stood out to me, other than the oxymoron, I guess, or the, I don't even know, human teachers is something. But the term children, I think, is also worthy of consideration, because that's the generation that ushers in whatever we give them, right?
Yes.
So if this type of learning or education is normalized, it's no longer challenged.
Right.
I think that they're deliberately targeting children in this way, and they're also not in a position to resist.
Yes.
They just absorb and accept and reproduce. So. And
wait until I show you the video of the children interacting with the robot, because that's exactly right. And they even say in the article, they're like, the robot can dance Gangnam Style. And they're like, it's wonderful. It really, I know we're all laughing because we could laugh or we could cry about this. And this is literally how I felt when I was reading this. But it was so absurd. It was like, this, don't worry, the robot can dance Gangnam Style. So anyway, so this video that I want to show you is, this video is not a teacher. Does anybody know?
Yeah, it's a virtual news presenter.
It's a virtual reporter. Yeah. So this is from China. And the reason I want to show you this video is because when I was looking at these articles about the robot in Finland, a couple of places people were like, it's like that robot in China that can read the news. Like that's out there. And the other reason I want to show you this is to juxtapose this robot against what you're going to see with the children, and then talk about like what's going on. Okay, so this is the newscaster.
This is my very first day in Xinhua's agency. My voice and appearance are modeled on Zhang Zhao, a real anchor with Xinhua. The development of the media industry calls for continuous innovation and deep integration with the international advanced technologies. I will work tirelessly to keep you informed as text will be typed into my system uninterrupted. I look forward to bringing you the brand new news experiences.
Okay, so that's the reporter, right? Okay, so then, if you haven't seen that before, the first time I saw that I was like, oh, I didn't even know. Okay, hold on. Oh wait, hold on. The reporter went and played somebody else. Ah! Sorry about that. You know how like YouTube does that?
Yeah.
All right, let me find that tab. And I can't get at it because this is so big. Yeah, okay, let me close this one. All right, so this is the robot. This is the robot with the students. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Is neutral. It doesn't laugh if you make mistakes, and it's always it doesn't get tired of repeating words.
Well, maybe there still has to be a teacher to keep kids behaved.
Actually, so I wanted to say a couple other things about the news coverage when I was looking at this. So, the original, actually I meant to say something about this earlier. First of all, the first piece about Turnitin, the top news article was from the Wall Street Journal, which I don't have a subscription to. So I couldn't get you a quote from that story. So I had to actually kind of do a little digging even to find another open article to share some of that. This one, the top article that I found was from the New York Post, which I was like, wow, I can't put like a news article from the New York Post in my presentation. Like, let's use a reputable news source. But at the same time, I was like, but that's where the general public is potentially encountering these stories about technology in our classroom, is in news publications like the New York Post, which is not terribly nuanced about talking about these issues, right? Eventually, I also found a Washington Post article. I had to really dig for it. Who here knew about this robot? About Elias? I was like, how have I never heard of this before, right? Like, understandably, it's K-12. It's a slightly different. I work in higher education. Maybe that's why. But this story broke last year, and I had it. Did you have a question? You're not just raising your hand because.
The only reason I know about Elias is because it's the counter for what's the aging population. So we know about Elias because of AI that's coming for dementia care.
Gotcha.
So it was something that we're able to use as a comparison factor.
I see. So did everybody catch that? So what was your name?
Brian.
So he was saying he's aware of this because it is part of the conversation about also using AI for aging populations in dementia care. Yeah. Here.
What strikes me about the advertisement was how the sales pitch is that it's sort of a substitute for this non-biased teacher and the non-judgmental. So rather than actually doing the work to address bias, social relations, race, gender, we are so lazy that we're going to substitute out the teacher and put in this robot who will objectively assess students. And again, it comes back to this notion of objectivity being, so important for whatever reason, as though it's achievable in its truth again.
Yeah. To add on to this point, which I think is funny, right? Like, why would we actually teach them about bias and we can just purchase not bias, right? At my institution, we had a joint research opportunity, and a professor proposed, their project was called an AITA, which didn't make any sense to me. So I kept reading their projects, and it's basically, I proposed that we have AI capability that can answer redundant questions. So not everything requires my attention, not everything requires my critical thought or my expertise. Imagine if there was a machine that could answer these redundant student questions.
As though redundant questions are not real questions.
Right, completely.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me about that isn't just the, mitigating of the student asking you a question. Yeah. It's the fact that we are the ones, as educators or in these institutions, that we're purchasing the ability to replace ourselves with machines. We are suggesting that instead of having teachers, we have machines that can do our jobs. Yeah. My project is, I don't want to hire graduate students or TAs. I'd rather you fund my research, which is in AI, so that I don't have to actually hire anybody. Which, wouldn't that mean that we no longer have funding and tuition and employment? Do you know what I mean? So it's not just how this happens in the outside world because there's this toy for children. Yeah. It's the fact that we as instructors don't recognize how capitalism is a part of our own institutions. Yes. And we create...
We're actually feeding the beast.
Right?
Yes, I know.
We're feeding the beast and we don't even own our own data.
Right, and at the same time, the other beast is taking our data and selling it. But it's okay because the investors think it sounds really good. And did you want to say something, Dusty, or you just raised your hand?
I also, the word tireless was used to describe both. The news reporter is tireless, the robot will never get tired of asking questions of the kids. And so it gets back to the labor issue. But essentially, we're made so tired that we are then going to have these things sold to us because they're tireless. Oh my gosh, and if only that robot could do a little bit of my labor so that then maybe I could take a nap in class. Well, that's not really, but so that I could get some sleep or get some rest. What was that? Or watch Netflix.
Well, but on your cell phone, not
not for wireless.
So a couple things about that. And there was a reason I showed that reporter robot and this robot, because obviously those are really different robots, right? But I don't have answers to this, but I'm really interested in the conversation about the robot for kids and the robot as reporter. And are we on a trajectory where the robot for reporter is the next generation of the robot for kids? On the one hand, the robot for kids it's cute. It looks like a robot. It's not uncanny valley, right? Like, you know that's a robot. But I kind of feel like the language suggests people think maybe it would be even better because then you could have affect, right? Like, not only would it not get tired, it could smile at you.
Right. The older adults will do is it's supposed to recognize affect.
Right.
So it's for emotional capacity.
Right. Yes.
There were some studies on building robots, and there was concern about the facial features being too human.
Yeah.
And so they wanted it to be less human because
we're creeped out by that.
And even if you
think about the developmental considerations, I mean, the example you gave about Netflix, it's adult learning. So, I think I had a mom come to one of my office hours, and I was shocked because I thought, this is adult learning. Why would it? But we're treating them like children by controlling what they access. Yes. So it just doesn't. Anyway,
it's part of a whole narrative, right? And it's all part of a whole narrative, and it all speaks as of one. Yeah.
I think also maybe as a footnote or as implicit in that narrative, unfortunately, is the conversation of gender. Like, these robots are not gendered, but we also have gendered robots. For example, we have Alexa and we have Siri and we have these other machines that perform services that we regard as women. Do you know what I mean? And it's a part of a hidden curriculum that children don't understand.
Right.
You can't just ask women for things 24/7. They perform this labor, or this emotionally, where they don't get tired because she sounds really sweet and pleasant all the time. Right. Like, well, goddamn, I'm a person, and I'm not going to service you. Stop asking me for stuff.
Yeah.
You're in. Right.
So, exactly. And so I kept looking at these robot stories because, like I said, I did this so that you can, but you don't have to go down this rabbit hole. And so I found these 3 articles, and I'm just going to put them up, and then we can talk about them. Can everybody read that? The solution to our education crisis might be AI. Are educators next in line for a robot takeover? That's from futurism.com. The future includes good human teachers, just in case you were worried. This is from the Hechinger report. Some things just can't be automated, and the teacher who makes you think is one of them. Okay.
Oh God.
So got that? Robots won't replace instructors. Good. Instead, they'll help them be more human. So they're just going to be like our assistants. Yeah, I would try to summarize that for you. That's a project at Penn State. It has a name. It has a code name. It's not. I think its code name is something like, I don't want to get it wrong because I'm live streaming. Somebody should look it up for me. All I can remember is that I'm pretty sure the code name has an exclamation point at the end. And so they're basically getting at this notion of, the other thing that happens when you look at these articles is that robot means lots of different things. And so AI is everything from like an online tutor that's just really a system that helps answer redundant questions, which is problematic in and of itself. It's everything from that to the uncanny valley reporter who reads whatever text is fed to it. But these 3 pieces, I was like, boy, are we worried about this, right? Like, whether we're talking about it explicitly or not, there's anxiety about this. Like, are robots replacing teachers? No, robots aren't replacing teachers. Well, robots aren't replacing teachers, but they are going to help teachers. Yeah.
I just wanted to say it's called Eureka.
Eureka, and it is with an exclamation point. Yes, Eureka. That's the name of the state.
And
So dig and Eureka.
And there's recently been research around sentencing in AI.
Yes.
Where they found the bias in the algorithms that have been programmed by humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the other part of this that gets lost, is that all AI is a product of human engineering, right? Like, we're not at the point now where, thank God, where AI is just like actually sentient computers, right? It actually is coded, right? And so all of this is based on human decisions and human choices while writing that code, and all humans have bias. And so this notion that AI or robots can ever somehow be like impartial or agnostic is just a myth that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better about this. Yeah, Brian.
This can help fuel the conversation. So I also I come from a 2U university now, so I think capitalism is really important to actually speak to. So for 2U as a vendor who partners with predominantly private universities to help launch their degrees online and at massive scale. So we literally doubled our master's program in the past 6 months. So we've gone from about 500 to 1,000 as of this coming quarter, which is counter to what we had to read as faculty, the slow professor. So it's like there's these tension points that I think we're feeling right now in terms of this tirelessness of we're getting told this narrative of this will help us, this will free up our time to become more of the professors we wanted to be, but it's also at what compromise to quality.
Well, and you start to feel like it's an engine that's running, right? That this isn't about critical human choices, this is about a capitalist engine that is driving us to more and more labor and more exhaustion, and so don't worry, the capitalist engine is going to save us from that too. It's like, but how about if we just stop the engine for a minute and talk about what real life should look like, what our lives really should look like?
And I think in a lot of, in the US system and a lot of other countries' system, this stuff is being made go by the defunding of education. Because the reason why your program has to scale so fast is to keep up with what was already a budget of austerity from for years, 10 years, to sort of even catch up with 10 years of austerity from the state government.
Right. I mean, that's the larger context that's happening at all of our schools. Yeah.
I was just going to add that from my perspective in Canada as well, I think that I think that a lot of us exist in this kind of happy place where we're like, our education is publicly funded, and we and that means something, and these are our values as Canadians. But we recently, like from a government speak perspective, we actually have to start calling our institutions publicly assisted because they're less and less.
They're not public.
Coming from the government. So I think sometimes I think that there is tendency as Canadians to kind of think that these capitalist forces aren't as predominant, and they're not. It's true that they're not quite as aggressive, but they still exist, and I think we need to have that conversation.
And I really think that neoliberalism in the economy has forced schools to become reliant on quote-unquote free tools, which are not free. Google, I don't trust G Suite, for toilet paper, actually. And there's a lot of other products that schools who don't have the funding are turning to free tools, and they don't really realize the extent to which they are trading privacy and access to information for these tools.
It's a very good point. And the other thing I think it's important to acknowledge in response to all of this is that, well, I should say the next step in all of this is that what we are creating, like in this narrative, one of the things that we're creating is a weird adversarial relationship with our students, right? Like the technology is coming in the way of that relationship with students, whether it's robots who we're relying on to do the difficult labor of answering redundant questions, or whether it's turning off streaming services because we can't trust students to self-regulate themselves, but really it's about bandwidth. Whatever those stories are, ultimately what we're really doing is we're telling students that we are at odds, right? Like this technology is complicating our relationship in such a way that we're having to make choices that put us at odds in the conversation. And then you have stories like this. And this was interesting. This was all over my like network when this came out the other day. Because people were like, wow, fascinating. Students are using Google Docs to chat in. Well, that sounds like a great idea. They can't use other services. They should use the thing that the Google thing that the school allows them to use, right? Because it's part of the Google suite. And this is just one example of this. There have been examples of this since internet filters went into place in schools in the 90s, right? Like I remember going years ago. Does anybody here ever go to EduCon, the K-12 conference in Philadelphia? I don't know. It's a really, really great. It's far for you guys. It's a really, really great conference about education and technology in K-12. If you're not aware of it, it's a great thing to follow, even if you never go. Anyway, so it's held at this school that's a fantastic public school in the city of Philadelphia that students, it's a lottery system, students get into it. It's a science school. It's called the Science Leadership Academy, and it has a relationship with the Franklin Institute, which is a science museum in Philly. And it's, I could spend a lot of time talking about the model of pedagogy at SLA, but when you go to EduCon, if you get there early, the students will take you on a tour of the school. And like I remember the very first time I went, and this was like in 2008 or 2009, I think, and the students are kind of taking us on a tour, and we're talking about the internet, and we're talking about access, and the Philadelphia school system has these filters in place at that point to prevent, I don't know what it is at this point, at that point to prevent students going to like YouTube, because YouTube was new and very, very dangerous. So students shouldn't be looking at it at school. And all of the students at SLA were like, well, we figured out in the first week how to get around it with proxy access. And it was a challenge. I'm not going to say that they were challenged to do that explicitly, but definitely these were the kinds of students who were like, oh, well, we'll just figure out a way around that. So not only are we creating these adversarial relationships, I mean, I guess in some ways our students are really creative but I'd like to see their creativity put to use in other ways than having to get around the things that we're doing to support their education. Yeah.
I also know, I term it guerrilla teaching in tech, where I know of teachers who have put routers in the ceiling, and then there's this hunt and search by the IT department when this is blocked. I wanted to write an article about it, but I never got around to it. But yeah, the teachers will put their own routers in the ceiling and hide them within the schools to give their kids access.
Yeah, so I love that, the rogue router that everybody is like, yeah, we gotta find it, they could get on YouTube. So my kind of takeaway from all of this is that what we're doing is we're setting up these dynamics of conflict, like between ourselves and our students and in our classrooms around what technology means and why and how we use it. And before we go any further, I want to actually take a break, and I want to let groups, the tables, I want to kind of do a little breakout. And I'd like people to talk, because these are examples, literally the examples I just showed you, all but one of them are from like the last week. Right? The only one that was older was the robot in Finland, and I just couldn't resist, and it was perfect. So I showed that. That's from like November of last year. So it's not even that long ago. But I'd love to have you guys talk about any other examples you know of. I mean, that's already come up a little bit, the dementia care robots that Brian mentioned, for example. Examples that you know of either of kind of crazy ways in which technology is being used or talked about within your schools or your institutions, and or ways in which students are thwarting or trying to get around some of these things. And if nothing comes to mind, you could do things like Google like ads for some of these like vendors. Even just looking like some of the language that's used to sell these products. You did that in your presentation. Like it's all a blur at this point the last 2 days. But you looked at, was it you or Rajiv yesterday who looked at like the language of, that was you. That was literally 4 hours ago. So I'd like to have us just do that, break apart, and brainstorm and talk about those things, and then we'll come back and share those, because I think it's really interesting to hear some more of these examples, and then we'll move on. So we'll do that for like 5 to 8 minutes, no more. So do you guys have any really great examples? Thank you. I'm just going to ask each table, if they're willing to, if they came up with good examples, to share one example that they talked about quickly of maybe a problematic marketing of technology, problematic implementation of technology, or a way in which students are reacting to technology that are interesting. Yeah. Okay, let's give our attention to this table.
I don't know if any of you have read M.T. Anderson's The Thief, but it's a youth novel. You need to read it.
It's a great book.
But Harvard and MIT have come out with this like implant for your head that it'll transmit a voice within like 500 feet, and they're trying to extend it, and it's being sold as like this innovative chip for people with hearing issues. And at the same time, I think it's Stanford who's done the lens implant that will overlay augmented reality and all kinds of reading, and it's just crazy. And we were likening it to a Black Mirror episode.
Well, and I love that it's coming from Harvard, MIT, and Stanford, because it's basically like they're calling from inside the house. The call is from inside the house. So who else? Anyone else have an example to share? It's okay if you didn't come up with any. We have other things to talk about.
I just looked it up. I didn't share online, but they have a robot that is designed to teach children with autism social skills. Wow. He's very happy though. So
he's happy.
The robot is happy? Well, at least it's not an evil robot. Any others?
We were talking in our group about course evaluations, and I was imagining what's going to happen with that Canvas data when Canvas we don't need students to evaluate courses anymore. Canvas can just do it for us.
Ooh. Yeah.
We talked about a little bit different stuff. Can I talk about different stuff for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Okay. We talked about, or maybe I did.
I like your honesty.
Social media, the fact that I think that we are noticing like a cultural shift, or maybe like an inversion of how learning is privileged. And basically, I remember back in the day, not that long ago, but like public schools need to have more resources and more funding so that, every student can have the same experience or the same opportunities. And so now, like, my niece and nephew are in public school, grade 5 and grade 1, and they come home with Chromebooks, and it's like, I'm a good school. I hand out these free Chromebooks, and everyone has the same opportunity, and this is good. But then you see these social media moguls who are also parents, and they don't let their kids have as much technology. They don't let their kids have social media accounts or Chromebooks or what have you. And actually they're prioritizing, like, I like my school, or I feel like I have a better education because I go on more field trips, or I'm outside more, or I'm using my hands more, or I'm doing things with human beings more. And so I feel like, to put it into crude terms, like the lower classes are trying to keep up with what the upper classes are doing, but then the upper classes have advanced back downwards. And that's what's on vogue. And it's like, well, goddamn, weren't we poor first? Like, didn't we go outside first? Why aren't we on the top? You know what I mean? Sort of thing.
But also, didn't you invent the company that told us that this was the thing that we should be doing?
It's cyclic, right?
It's constantly, like that's nice for Bill Gates' kids.
So I think that's interesting in terms of what's privilege, in terms of experience and education.
So I wanted to say something too about what Jesse just said about the course evaluation. It took me a minute to process that. And I was like, that's so interesting. That so now you have the potential of a company like Instructure, an LMS company with major data about what's happening in your online courses, your course instances, being able to say, don't worry, you don't need course evaluations anymore. We're going to do that for you. The reason that's so problematic is because all of our schools were having conversations about how course evaluations are broken. But instead of addressing that problem ourselves, if we don't do that, somebody's going to come along and say, don't worry, we have a product for you. And there are administrators who will say, oh, thank God. Now we don't have to address that problem.
And the thing is that our desire for social justice will be weaponized against us by a company like that, because they'll say, hey, wait, you've all agreed
they need our room.
They need our room.
Yeah.
You've all agreed that course evaluations are sexist. So let's just let the computer do it for you, because that computers aren't sexist. The people who program computers aren't sexist.
Yeah.
Code isn't sexist.
So yeah, see what's my, I now I'm thinking that we talked about this vaguely, but we never set actual plans. But I think we can make it work. So if they need to come in here, that's fine. We'll go upstairs and you and I will talk and figure out what we do.
Yeah, and we'll just my track is going to just kind of continue.
You guys continue this conversation and we'll do the domain stuff.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they hooked up with LinkedIn?
I know, right? Yeah. We're not sure. It looks like Chris and Amy's track were actually going to come in here and we want to give them the space. You're going to take them, yeah. So what we will do, go to the bar. So what we will do then is we will go, my track will go back up to our room and I will finish the domain of one zone piece.
I've set it up and rearranged the room, so hopefully we have more space.
Yeah, and then Jesse's track will go back to his room. And you guys can still talk about domain of one zone, but you guys also can probably take everything we've been talking about and take it to
slightly
your...
different direction.
Yeah.
Just two comments.
Yeah.
We assume that everybody has access to technologies, right?
Yeah.
Because we haven't been talking about this urban and rural divide.
Yeah.